Hi, my name is Benedict. This is a follow-on from the last video that I did, the lure and lie of AI, yes, which still rhymes. Right at the end of that, I spoke about the genocide of being human, and that wasn't a planned thing. It came up, and you know what, it ties up with so many things that I see. And people think, oh, well, why is this necessary? Why is this relevant? I just want to make banging tunes. Great, I get you, I really do. The problem is that if you're not getting what you want in terms of your achievements, okay, maybe some of it is not achievable, either for you or just simply the weight of numbers is against you. But if you're having a lot of other problems, specifically the issues of being able to even feel comfortable with what you're making, then perhaps you are suffering from this broad cultural genocide of being human. This comes from some of the artists that I'm working with. This also comes from from things that I've seen. I guess I'll name drop specifically Gregory Scott of Kush Audio, his recent video on YouTube. Look it up. And I just watched a thing with Jordan Peterson. Now, Jordan was being asked the question that had been posted in, you know, if I'm concerned about wokedom potentially cancelling me, how do I stop this from happening? And it's a long and detailed and involved video because Jordan is just speaking off the cuff. So he goes here, there, and everywhere. It's not for the faint of heart, but look it up. He's in a nice light-coloured suit. Looks very dapper, but then Jordan always looks very dapper. So again, you might be thinking, how's that got to do with me as a musician? One of the other factors on this was that in a guy's conversations, now I think this guy is just a scammer, but somebody asked, how do I get my artist identity? And while I would have loved to answer that, because I wasn't comfortable with the fellow himself and his platform and what he might potentially do, his attempts to probably cancel me, because the last guy like this did. I've been cancelled quite a few times if you know me and my history. Then I just figured out it was better not to touch it. It was better, it probably wasn't going to go anywhere. So a big part of this is about the very broad question of how do I start to find my artist identity? And how do I start to actually get to do stuff? Because one of the big issues that we've got is we've got a culture of rushing everybody into anything. Nobody does the basics. And then they get told to do things like, oh, AI will do it all for you. Or AI will make your drum samples for you. Is that art? No, it's making a random noise. An argument that I put forward just this morning was that would you want to fly in a Boeing, you know, an airliner, that's self-assembled semi-randomly from learning as a result of having watched a couple of those Disney airplane movies, you know, the ones that followed on after Cars, so a couple of talking airplanes. If that was its training set, would you want to fly a self-assembled Boeing? I imagine that your answer would be, hell no, sir, I ain't flying that thing, because it's not going to work. And that's the problem that we face as musicians, that we're trying to fly something that can't work because it's built on some really seriously, dangerously flawed fantasies. Now, while there's nothing against aeroplanes, they weren't as good as cars, as the movies, the ideas that we're carrying are dangerously flawed. So this is the genocide of being human. We live in this culture that is so flawed but what it does is set us up to spend our lives being terrified. That in part came when I was in a goth-type group, and to be honest, when they told me this, I just thought, what a bunch of sad losers. And while I still think that from the people that said this, I now understand it much better. So I'm sorry if I didn't seem to understand at the time. I still think that you are sad and deluded and greatly mistaken, but not mistaken in the fear that you have of constantly being cancelled. Because that's a culture we've built. The DAWsphere is full of this. The DAWsphere being the, places where people talk, and I'm on the fringes of this as well, but I've largely been thrown out of or left just about all of these places, the forums, the groups, the things where people try to, because they're about a delusion of perfection. And I know it's a delusion because when presented with what we might call true perfection, let's, for example, say Pink Floyd's The Wall, it's quite reasonable to say that that is a perfect record, as is Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run. That is quite reasonably a perfect record. But they often deride that quality of work, the Eagles, whatever, and then put up something that's, well, shitty, not perfect, not got anything good to say, and hold that up as being this is what we should be doing. What we should be doing terrible work, and then if you don't do that, if you don't meet their approval, they cancel you. They will find ways to be mean and unkind and derisive and tell you you're doing it all wrong. So who are these people to say that you're doing it wrong? Everyone has an opinion, everyone has a right to an opinion. I agree with that. But when they hold a greater right than everybody else, that's Orwell's all animals are equal except for the pigs, who are just better than everybody else because, well, they're the pigs. That's a fucked up attitude. And whilst we're pretending to be all kind of perfect, doing that at the same time is seriously wrong. The reason this is relevant is because we're internalizing this. We are fighting even to say that this is the right thing to do. The number of people who fought against me and told me, oh, Benedict, you're wrong. Oh, you're just being difficult. It's like, no, this guy actually kicked me in the balls. That's how he started the fight, by kicking me in the balls. That's not only an unmanly way to start a fight. It's a fight that didn't actually occur until he kicked me in the balls. And then when I punched him back in the face, which is fair in the situation, only I used rational arguments to say, here is why you are wrong, sir. Then I got thrown out. Most people aren't daring to actually punch back. Somebody kicks them in the balls or threatens to kick them in the balls, and they just go, oh, sorry, sir, I'll do better next time. And we're going along and we're supporting this. So we are internalizing this really, really messed up idea that we should be seeking approval of people who are telling us that what's less than perfect, often just really bottom feeder garbage, is what we should be doing. And that if we're doing something that's not that we're to be cancelled. Firstly, these people have no right to cancel us under their own logic of everybody has a right to self-expression. And secondly, fuck you, because that's the right response. And if they say, oh, I'm going to cancel you now for saying fuck you, it's like, well, you know what? You tried to cancel me. You label me, I label you, I dub the unforgiven. Metallica told us that back in 91. And it is true. And if we don't stand up and have that in our mindset, that if you're going to label me, if you're going to call me cancelled, then I am going to cancel you. I've removed these people as much as possible from my life because they didn't give me any benefit. What's the point of hanging around listening to their opinions when all their opinions are is trying to shove knitting needles up my backside? I don't get off on that. I never asked for it. I even asked them to stop it, but they keep doing it. Okay, so how do we move forward? Getting back to what you think of as being the point is, how do we find our own self and our own path? Obviously, we've got to put aside this mindset, which is easy to say and hard to do because it means that we're in the middle of everything. Oh, the reason I don't have Reason open, I don't have my door open because we're not showing music here. I do lots of that kind of stuff. Go find those things. Sooner or later, some champion is going to come along and try to cancel me by saying, how dare you have an opinion? Well, sir, firstly, fuck you. Now, if you're still here saying, how dare I have an opinion, before you express your rudeness, understand that I'm going to come back at you saying, what have you done to justify your aggression? Here is my proof. This is just the published work, all the stuff that's published on Bandcamp. These are actually compilations of decades of work. along with all individual albums here as well, and there are many missing. The reason is, if you want to have a pissing contest, the number one rule of having a pissing contest is you have to stand up, pull your pants down, hang it out and piss. I've just done that. I've shown you my work. There's shitloads of it. These are not random songs or singles. These are albums. A couple of them are EPs, but even some of my EPs are an hour long. There is a massive amount of work here. Whether you like it or approve of it, I don't give a flying banana peel. But if you don't have this level of work, then you need to think very carefully how you speak, lest I actually wipe your face with your own poo. Okay, meanness hopefully put aside. It's just I want to head that off, and if somebody hasn't watched this far and still wants to do it, that's going to hurt them. So we have to put aside this fake idea that we have been fed and largely swallowed, internalized, and started to worship. We have to put aside the idea of perfection. There have been quite a few videos recently looking at classic records and being somewhat amazed, horrified, put out, whatever, that they are full of not perfect. It's kind of sad. If we take Dark Side of the Moon and we listen to it carefully, there are lots of things in there that we could say, well, they're not perfect. Bat out of hell. That's not a perfectly mixed record by anybody's estimation. It's a bit muddy, it's a little bit thin, but who gives a because it's a hell of a record. Far more than most people realise. It took me a long time to realise that the depth of the meta story on that record. Steinman, sir, you are a master, even just for that one record. They may not have fully ever recaptured that, but that record alone is a masterwork. So that's perfection, and that kind of perfection is full of all kinds of unique moments. And that is part of what makes it truly perfect. Not about, as somebody put up recently, about, oh, well, are we going to come up with some kind of AI soon that makes mistakes? And people were like, oh, but we already do that with vinyl noise. And then he was like, no, are we going to come up with an AI that deliberately plays out of tune, out of time, that plays duff notes, that plays poor harmony, as in real musician mistakes? And people were struggling to get that. And it's like, yeah, that's an interesting point of view, and sad that we should be asking that question, because he's actually a real player. So the idea of AI is obviously somewhat offensive to him. We have to put aside this concept of approval. If you're waiting for someone's approval, then who are you? How can you find who you are if you're busy looking at somebody else? Let's pick The Prodigy. If all you do is look at The Prodigy and say, well, I can't be anybody until I'm equal to The Prodigy, who said it's your path to be The Prodigy? Is it even strategically a good idea to try to be The Prodigy? Because the thing is, The Prodigy, well, it's basically Liam, and Liam and his buddies are a result of being Liam and his buddies, Keith Flint, what have you. So the reality is they're not you, you can't be them. At best, you can be a poor clone, which is a fail. Because by nature, we tend to try to push away people who clone. So you've got to put aside this concept of approval. You've got to put aside the idea of formulas, of genres, and what's okay to do, therefore what's not okay to do. Because as long as you're filling your head with that, when you sit down to write something, to make something, to do something, this applies to all form of art, everything, even business. The reality is, if you come in there with a head that's got nothing but everybody else, how can you find yourself? How can you find who you are as a unique artist? You absolutely can't. All you'll do is put something down and go, I've pressed that C key. But the genre rule is I'm only allowed to press the F sharp key. Yeah, there is a genre like that. You're only allowed to work in F sharp. It's like, bugger that. You're then going to go, well, the story that I was trying to tell, I now cannot tell. I have to modify it, but not in a positive way, not to make it better. I just have to gut it. I have to fillet it. I have to stab it. I have to hit it with a ball peen hammer to try to force it onto F sharp. And if F sharp isn't the timbre of your story, but C was, you've just shot yourself in the foot. Whatever you do after that will be wrong, because every decision you make will not be based on who you are, what your piece of music's about. It'll be based on seeking the perfection, the approval of formulas and genres. And therefore, you can't find what's going to make you uniquely you. There is a broad genreification to say that Pink Floyd, Fleetwood Mac, Meat Loaf, Billy Joel, all of these things, they're all classic rock, therefore they're all the same. That's vastly offensive, simply because you're taking away the individuality of each of those acts, and they were individual. You listen to just any single song of those people, you might say, oh, well, it's broadly more similar to each other than a trap song. Yeah, so that doesn't mean anything. They are broadly perhaps a little different from a Black Sabbath song, but there's actually more in common with them and a Black Sabbath song than there is a Black Sabbath song and a trap song. So it's a pointless argument, but one that people have swallowed, and they've said, I will lump all these things into being one thing so that we can dismiss them, which makes it easy for you to go along with that and say, well, I'll dismiss that. I will dismiss all my ideas. So you've got to put that aside. All their formulas and genres, in your attempt to seek approval and be told that you're perfect, have to go. And you go, oh, but what's left? I don't know. Well, that's good. That's good. Once you're empty, you're now able to become full of something. Hopefully not the garbage that you just threw out, because it's going to try and sneak its way back in. You're going to sneak back into a group or forum, and you're going to hear them going on about the idea of perfect genres and having to make sure that you're on F sharp tuned to 432 hertz or whatever absolute, absurd, ridiculous garbage that they're on about this week. And you're going, well, I'll do that because it must be the right way to do it. No, you've just filled yourself back up with the wrong ideas. Throw them all out. Start with empty. Up to you how you start to write pieces, but if you start by taking somebody else's formula, you're wrong, because it's no longer your piece. It was never your piece. You'll only fail with it. You'll be unsatisfied even if you get it working and try to fool yourself that it's okay, and even if you get the approval of these dangerous people in the DAWsphere, because they will never buy your record. And if you start to have success, they will deride you. They'll say, oh, well, he's not one of us anymore. They'll cancel you because you're exceeding their abilities and they can't handle that. So start with this empty platform, this empty slate, this nothing. And then be silent. Was that uncomfortable, me being silent? Be silent. Allow what is actually inside you, what is you, to come out. What comes out there when you're not busy editing it will be your voice. It may not be strong to start with, and then put it down, depending upon how you do things, whether you play guitar or whether you actually play keyboards or whether you mouse things onto the screen. Start. Not in a judging way, not in a somebody else's way, but in your way, going, okay, I'm going to put this in and I'm going to do this. And once you feel like, okay, I've got the nugget of an idea, that's all it is. It's a nugget of idea. Do not go back to the rules of the DAWsphere and saying, I have to do this, I have to do this. No, allow this to develop as it is. It may be quite different from what you think. The music that I make now is actually not what I thought I would make. To be perfectly blunt, when I first started, I thought this kind of stuff was, well, I call it sleepy time music in quite a derisive sort of a way. I then realized I actually listened to a certain amount of sleepy time music, and this became my style. Not because I set out to achieve it, it became my style because the other things and times where I tried to chase other things, I just got to the end of that period, and I realized that no one was going to reward me for that other thing anyway because I never kept their formula. So my best path was to please myself and to become so unique that I have no competitor. I'm not aware of having a competitor. Some people will say, oh, it reminds me of Jarre or reminds me of Vangelis. Okay, great. I'm happy enough with that. I'm even happier when they say it reminds me of Tomita. But I'm not aware of an artist that sounds quite like me. I'm winning. I've got something unique. That is my platform. It's not popular, but the more I've settled into being what I am, the more people actually buy my records. That number is small, but that number is vastly 500% more than used to buy my records when I was busy trying to be somebody else. That's a pretty decent statistic. 500% sounds impressive. Okay, the numbers are still incredibly small, but nonetheless, the proof is there, statistically, if nothing else. So you've got to just do it. Just do it. Without this idea of approval, of perfection, of formulas, of genres, of saying, oh, but the Prodigy did this, so I have to do that. You've got to stop yourself at that point. Empty the mind. Go silent again. Blank sheet of paper inside here. Reconnect with the idea of what your song is. And then develop it. Go that little bit further, that little bit further, that little bit further. And develop it as much as you can melodically. Not by saying, oh, I'll put in 57 more ratcheted and beat chopped drums and Juno 106 basses, because that's probably not what your idea is about. You can put them in later if they actually support your idea, what your song is really about, but not until they actually support it. Work melodically. So you've got what's called variations. So if my first phrase is do-do-do, do-do-do is a variation. Do-do-do is a variation. Do-do-do is a variation. Work on this idea of variations and then work on expanding it, because that's what we might call a motif or an ostinato. If we just go do-do-do, do-do-do, do-do-do over and over again, we're not getting very far. We're not actually developing ourself. We're not developing our song. We're not developing our own self and path. Because how we actually expand these things, the choices we make there, are actually what define us. Do-do-do, do-do, do-do-do, do-do, do-do, do-do is an expansion of that. And now that's a melody that's a Benedict melody. I'm not interested in whether it's a good or a bad melody. Probably out of tune. Need to auto-tune that bit. But it's my choices. I wasn't busy going do-do-do-do, do-do-do-do-do, ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. I wasn't doing that. It was do-do-do, do-do, do-do-do, do-do, do-do, or something like that. The way that I put those things together, that becomes me. That becomes myself, and therefore it becomes my path. And once you've built that up and that your piece is actually really singing, that it's speaking, as in having a conversation, then you can start to fill it in with extra little bits and pieces. And if that is endlessly ratcheted beat-chopped Juno 106s and 909s, okay, great. But you might well find that what the piece is calling for, what it's asking for, is actually different. And that is really good, because now you're finding your path. And when you present your material, yes, if you make the mistake of presenting it to the fearful few in the DAWsphere who act like they are the totality of the universe, then yes, they won't understand you, but who cares? They don't understand themselves. They've got nothing intelligent to say, so they've got nothing but cancellation. They'll cancel you. That's your fault for being there. Find a real audience. When you get in front of a real audience of real music buyers, because if they don't buy it, they don't love it, then you will start to find that some people will go, I dig that. I may not have got it the first time, but I dig that. I've had that quite a lot of times over the decades. People go, yeah, look, when I first heard your piece, I thought it was shit. But after some time, it started to make sense to me. Now I think it's really rather clever. That means that person started to get off their high genre horse and started to accept what I had done and engage in the conversation that I had with them. They were starting to understand that I had a self, I had a path, I had my own thing. This is what you have to do. Is there any simple way of doing this? Yes, I just gave it to you. Clear your mind. Put what is there on the page, in the door, in whatever method you use. Because I'm not interested in methods. I'm not interested when people approach me. They often start by giving me their gear list. What for? What do I care about what your gear list is? If you're a guitarist, I assume you have a guitar. If you're a guitarist and you approach me telling me you don't have a guitar, then you're not a guitarist. I don't know what you're here for. Probably to try to scam me for something. Maybe money to buy a guitar, but I'm not going to give you that because you've proven yourself unready already. So the reality is, start, do your thing. Develop it as you. That allows you to establish a unique artist identity. The artist identity is a result of the choices that you make, as opposed to the choices that Pink Floyd or Springsteen or Meatloaf would make. And definitely as opposed to the choices that the One Prodigy record that you own made. Because that's really not cool. We can learn things from listening to all these records, from Pink Floyd through to The Prodigy and Cannibal Corpse. We can learn things. And yes, if we're broadening our ability to communicate, like somebody who speaks 14 different languages, yeah, we've broadened our ability to communicate. So they can be like C-3PO and go anywhere in the world and be able to converse with people. But those conversations mean nothing if they're not actual conversations. If it's just turning up and shouting the same 4 words over and over, purple dishwasher monkey, in 12 languages, there's no sense in this. No one's going to listen to you. They might laugh at you for a second, but then they're going to shut you out. So just do it. Publish it, and then do it again. This is the really important pivot. If you don't do this, then you'll go right back where you were before. You do it, you publish it, and you do it again. In publishing it, you're saying, I'm drawing a line under this. This is done. So I'm not reworking this same piece for 47 years, chasing somebody else's idea of perfection so that I can finally get their approval. The thing is, people keep reworking their same things, and that means you're not letting go of it. Do it, finish it as best you can today, totally ignoring perfection, approval, all this kind of BS. If there are things that you can't do, then bring in somebody who can. And if you go, oh, but I'm not prepared to spend money or I'm not prepared to commit to that, then stop. If you're not prepared to commit to what your art is, like I've committed a lot to my art over the decades. It has hurt me greatly. I'm not as wealthy as I should be because I've committed to my art. Do I want to see my kids go down this path? One of them's talking about being a comic book person now. She always wanted to do other art thing, and now is talking about being a comic book person. And do I want that for her? Part of me is like, yeah, great. If she's going to go off and have an artistic life, absolutely bully. I mean, how cool is that? Poor thing's following my footsteps. So which leads me to the other half, this rational half that goes, no, don't do this. Take up being a plumber. You'll get more money faster. You'll be able to drive around in a nice truck with plumber written on the side. You know, you'll actually be able to buy a nice house. It's not to say I don't have a nice house. I saved super, super hard from when I was younger, and so I own a nice apartment, thank God. If I hadn't planned for my financial stability and worked at it, I would have nothing now because I gave it all to music. But you've got to do it, you've got to commit to it, you've got to publish it. That allows you to come back and see it for what it is. And then you do it again, you publish it. And then you do it again, you publish it. And by it, I don't mean the same thing. You write a new piece, and then you write a new piece, and then you write a new piece. And as soon as you get to the point where you can move past singles, then you need to be working on albums. In the interim, you might work on EPs. You might just gather those first few singles that you've done and say, okay, I'll turn them into an EP now. You get rid of the single releases and you turn them into an EP. Yes, you'll lose the plays, but who cares? You turn it into an EP because now it's a body of work. Because if you don't show bodies of work, then you're nowhere. Stephen King, I often pick him as an example of being a great writer. He is. He's made lots of money. Lots of people very, very happy for reading Stephen King books. I'm always happy to see there's a new Stephen King book. When we buy a Stephen King book, it may have a couple of parts in it, parts 1, 2, 3, or whatever. Think of it as a stand. It's got several parts in it. It's also got lots of little sections. Some of them are chapters. Sometimes they're just paragraphs inside a chapter. The whole book is the whole statement that is the stand, and it's a very impressive piece of work. If you only release loose singles, that's a little like just putting out paragraphs. How would we think of Stephen King and The Stand if he just randomly released some chapters or paragraphs? We might go, oh, that's kind of cute writing, but WTF, it's pointless. The Stand becomes valuable once it's this blob, huge, cohesive work. Same with Lord of the Rings. That's even bigger. 3 whole separate books. It's the cohesion of it, the fact that it is a big statement, a huge statement. So work on doing it again, and then getting it into a point in which it makes a statement. A unique statement, not one with AI cover art, because immediately that says to anybody who likes art, this person is not original. This person is not unique. I will buy a record or look at a record with ho-hum artwork over AI art every time. Every time I see somebody presenting me a musical work with AI art, I just don't even listen to it because they have told me right from the beginning that they are not trying to engage with me uniquely from themselves. They might go, oh, but my cover art is not going to be as good as the AI art. Good. You need to show me yourself. I made a video, that was actually for Higher Hertz, I think. Yeah, where I talked about Yellow Man. Yellow Man's famous for having some of the worst artwork for his album covers. But you know what? It makes sense. And it helped me, looking at that and discovering it and digging beneath the surface, that actually helped me to understand who Yellow Man was and how incredibly relevant he was for a while there, at least. So doing formula stuff is just falling back into the perfectionist approval of the DAWsphere. So your simple solution to finding what's my unique path and who am I and how do I get to do this is to put aside the idea of perfection that you keep being told, to put aside approval. Because as soon as you're chasing approval, you're fearful of cancellation. And that fear will cause you to do everything wrong. Put aside formulas and genres, that's all a subset of all of that. Just do it. Start with an empty slate. Put what is there, what is from you on that. Create your variations of that idea. 2, 3, 4 of them. Build it up so that it's melodically really good, not just repetition and ratcheting beat-chopped 106 bass lines or whatever. Once you've got that, then if you're not quite sure how to finish it yourself, bring in an expert. Bring in somebody who does this and has that experience. And if you're not prepared to bring somebody in for whatever reason, whether that's cost or unwilling to let go of the ego of being the sole producer, then you really haven't stepped aside. You haven't made the music, the art, more important than your fears. And your fears will get you, and you probably should kind of give up or accept that you just do this for a laugh, in which case don't look at wasting your time or anybody else's by publishing it, because that's not what you're after. You're just for the fun of whittling some knobs, like I might kill aliens at the end of the day for fun. It's pointless, but it's a nice sort of let go. If that's the case, go do that. Hopefully this makes sense to you. It's not the usual thing, but my job is not to do the usual thing. My job is to challenge what is usual, to help people find how they can do something that really matters. And if you are interested in doing something that really matters and getting some assistance in finding your feet or getting it deliverable, then I will be delighted to hear from you. My contacts will be below. You have a great day.